Hello, everyone. Welcome to Art and Research Collective's webinar on city poetry. Today, we're going to experiment with poetry as a way of exploring place, memory, and a sense of community. I invite you to think of it webinar as less about being a poet or learning how to be a poet, and more about letting your inquiry be creative and letting language help you identify and listen differently to yourselves, to others, and importantly, to the places that shape us. My name is Natalia Balyasnikova. I'm an assistant professor at York University, a word weaver, meaning maker, learning catalyst, border crosser, and a proud member of the Artem Research Collective. And I'm the one who's going to lead you through this webinar today. So what is Artem Research Collective? Artem is a collective that's rooted in art, creativity, and community. Our names brings together Arte, which stands for art, craft, passion, and Artemis, a goddess of strength and resilience. We meet together as researchers with an intention to create healthier and safer research with communities, cross and connect disciplinary boundaries, respond to the needs of different groups, and importantly, to imagine pathways towards a more just world. You can find us on LinkedIn, read about us on our website, or follow us on Instagram. As an art and research collective, we engage in what we call collaborative creative inquiry. We define it as a synergetic journey into understanding that is both brave and vulnerable, reflexive and reflecting, aesthetic and analytical. You're welcome to read more about our theorizing of this process in our recent article, Collaborative Creative Inquiry, an Arts-Informed Approach to Transdisciplinary Research. I will take you through the 5 steps of CCI to outline what we're going to do today together. Let's take a moment to review the stage of collaborative creative inquiry. We always begin with questioning and provoking. At this stage, the group comes together to identify an issue that really matters in their community. It's not the researcher who comes with an outside question. It's the group that comes up with a question. Together, the group creates provocations. This is how we call questions or statements, with an intention of starting a dialogue, build trust, and welcome different perspectives. Next, the groups moves on to the stage that's called exploring and creating. Here, participants choose a creative medium to investigate their inquiry. It can be any medium that the group feels comfortable with. Poetry, as we're going to do today, drawing, performance, whatever feels accessible. What matters here is imagination and expression, not artistic skill or some external aesthetic standards. From here, the group moves into the stage called engaging and sharing. First, participants go and create their creative pieces. It can be as short as 5 minutes, as long as hours. Then participants come together to share their creative pieces with one another. At this stage, they not only show the creative piece, but they also explain the message behind them. The rest of the group listens. The goal of this stage is not to critique, but to listen, so that each perspective adds new layers of meaning. Next comes the stage called reflecting and praxing. At this stage, the group steps back and considers how the creative process itself has reshaped their understanding of the issue that they were trying to inquire about. This is where the group also can ask each other, what actions or changes might emerge from those insights? And finally, the groups moves on to the stage we call adapting and transferring. Participants here give each other feedback, not only on their creative work, but on the process itself. This feedback feeds the next cycle of inquiry, and it helps imagine the insights that were generated and how these insights might travel to other contexts, other disciplines, and other communities. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to lead you through these 5 stages, but it's a self-guided webinar, and you can pause at any time to do the work together in a group or maybe individually if you are trying this process out. So as I started this webinar, today we're going to experiment with poetry as a way of exploring place, memory, and community. Again, I just want to reiterate that this is not a webinar about how to be a poet or how to do good poetry, but more about inquiry and thinking of language and how it helps us listen differently, listen to ourselves, to others, and to places that shape us. I like to begin with poetry because it resists the tidy stories we're often told about neighborhoods or communities. A poem written by a longtime resident carries lived truth, what it feels like to belong, to resist, or to remember. So place-based poetry invites us to see beyond these big narratives that we see in guidebooks, media headlines, and instead to sit in the textures of the everyday life. I define place-based poetry as poetry that's rooted in places that connect us to multiplicity and complexity of life words. As you are engaging in this process, I invite you to think and pause and think about the deeper connections between language and place. First, we might ask, whose voices usually shape how we know a neighborhood? Often it's journalists, developers, tour guides, but not always the people who actually live there. Second, how does poetry offer a different way of witnessing place and community? Unlike statistical data or shouty headlines, the poem can carry emotion, rhythm, together with memory and stories of resistance. I quite often think about erasure. What stories get told when a neighborhood is changed? What stories get erased when it's gentrified? Whose histories are silenced? Whose remain visible? Whose interest does it all serve? And finally, the question that's going to guide our work today is, how might listening to place-based art shift our understanding of belonging? What pathways and perspectives can poetry open for us that we might not otherwise encounter? What complex or layered sense of what it means to live and to belong in this space can we see from the poem? I came to Canada in 2013 and I settled in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. As an immigrant and a settler here, I quite often relied on the stories that people told me about Vancouver, the media stories. And particularly, I heard a lot about Downtown Eastside. Downtown Eastside is a community and a space in Vancouver, which is quite often subject to discriminatory and stereotypical narratives. I heard stories that it's a place of homelessness, crime, drug addiction, and I believed those stories until I came onto the streets of downtown Eastside, here particularly on Main and Hastings, and I met some poets who lived in this place. And I want to share some of these poems with you today.
Yeah, Gilles Saran, this poem is called Main and Prior. Once a neighborhood, Hogan's Alley, amazingly colorful history. Vera's Steak and Chicken House, open all night, 5 to 5. Way back in the 40s, 50s, and early 60s. Jazz and cops and all-night corruption. Informal clubs, bootleg joints, rusty ducks. Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, the Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra, Sarah Vaughan hung out at Vera's after hours whenever they came to town. Jimi Hendrix' grandma worked there. Then a gang of Philistine, pig-ignorant white politicians, the cream of the corruption floating to the top, decided a freeway was a better idea. Too many people having too much fun. BYOB clubs. Can't have that. Tear it all down. Build a freeway. Kill all that freedom and all-night fun. Jazz and jitterbug. Good times. Gone. Way too wild for nice white guys. Way too wild for suits and bridge contractors.
You can listen to this poem and other poems by Gilles Saran at the website www.follomeproject.com. This poem is written by Gilles, who resides in Vancouver downtown East Side, one of the few remaining long-term residents of the neighborhood. This poem for me really resists the gentrified portrayals of downtown East Side, Strathcona, Chinatown, and instead speaks to the neighborhood layered history of stereotyping, displacement, and ongoing community resistance. I chose to begin our workshop with this poem because place-based poetry invites us into a deeper encounter with the lived realities of people and communities. For me, meeting Gilles and listening to his poem gestured beyond the narratives I encountered in news reports, in media representations, and instead asked me to think of belonging, struggle, and identity that was rooted in this place.
Yeah.
Another poem, you can also find it on followmeproject.com, is by Graham that encapsulates how community feels about hearing stories about their neighborhood.
Your judgment is hard for me to take. I live in a world of freedom inside my head. To hear the judgment of others is restricting, so I tend not to listen. That way, my world is open to all possibilities. Openness is like a breath of fresh air in a polluted world.
Graham says, openness is like a breath of fresh air in a polluted world. And I invite you to be open to different perspectives, to different experiences in the neighborhoods that you encounter every day. So let's go through the CCI cycle. Feel free to adapt it to your own context. And if you're listening to this webinar on the internet, on YouTube, pause at any moment. Before we begin our poetry writing and engaging with prompts, let's take a moment to arrive together. If you feel comfortable, you might close your eyes or simply soften your gaze. Notice your feet on the floor, your back supported by your chair. Take one slow breath in and one slow breath out. Arrive. Notice one sound in your space. Notice the temperature of the air on your skin. Think of a color of the room. Think of an object that draws your attention. Now think of a place that matters to you. It might be where you are right now or somewhere entirely different. As you think of this place, notice what arises in your body. Any sensations, any emotions, any memories. When you're ready, open your eyes. We're going to carry this grounded awareness of place into our work together today. Think of the place that you imagined at the previous step. Imagine asking a grandparent or an elder about this place. As they describe it, notice not only what they say, but imagine what they smelled, touched, tasted, or heard. Bring this memory, yours or someone else's, and braid this history with experience into poetry. Smells, tastes, sounds, textures, and colors is what brings the poetry alive. Take a pen or use your device to look back at the previous steps and think. If you had to describe how this place feels for you in just 3 words, what would they be? Don't overthink it. Go with what comes first. Take a moment, write these words down. Use them as your anchor as you go into the CCI steps. The first step in collaborative creative inquiry is framing the inquiry. Instead of beginning with any answers, we start with questions, or we call them provocations. Take the next 2 minutes to free write. What question or concern about a place, memory, or community do you want to explore today? If you're working in a group, once you've finished, share these questions and phrases from your writing and come up with a shared inquiry question for you to explore together. If you're working individually, write down this question or phrase. This provocation will guide the poem you'll be creating or you'll be creating together as a group. The second step is choosing a creative pathway. Pick your medium. The medium shapes your provocation. Today we're walking with poetry, but what kind of poetry? It's up to you. You can create a 6-word story, a found poem using the words from headlines or magazines. It can be a memory poem, a makeup of this place, a poetry that starts with the words this place is made of. Or it can be a dialogue with the place itself or an object in this place. It can be something that we haven't thought of. So take a moment and choose your pathway. If you're working in a group, you might consider choosing different poetic forms, or you may choose just one, shared one. In CCI, there are no right or wrong answers. What's important is following your curiosity. Now we create. In this webinar, for example, you can have 5 minutes to draft your poem. If you're working by yourself, you can take longer. If you're working in a group, you can negotiate how long this stage will take you. Remember, don't worry about perfection or aesthetics. It's about expression and discovery. Just let your words flow. You can write in fragments, in images, full sentences. Your poem can be unfinished. When the time is up, the point is to share. Get together with your partners or invite somebody and share. Share your poems. Read the poem. The listeners, you're not here to critique. Instead, think, what does this piece of art want me to notice? What questions does it leave me with? As you're presenting your poem, explain the meaning behind it. The others can respond with these questions, reflection, saying what the poem made you notice, what question it left you with, and then with their own poems. After each share, switch the roles. You can go through this cycle as long as you want, depending on how many people are in this workshop with you. After you've shared and discussed your poetry, you're coming back together to reflect. So if you're together, take a minute to reflect and think back on this whole process. Share one insight you gained through writing and one action you might take because of it. These actions can be really small. It can be a shift in noticing, writing more, or listening differently in your neighborhood. This is how reflection moves in practice. And last step is imagining where this work might travel. So you can ask yourself, how could place-based poetry live in your classroom, your family, your community? How can you use this method to inquire about other things in your discipline? You can think of a space where this method could be adapted. You can look back at the process and think how you could have adapted and changed it, and try again. Thank you for taking time to listen to this webinar. Thank you for sharing your words and your places. This workshop is just one step. Keep noticing, keep creating, keep carrying your places into art. You can follow us on LinkedIn, read about our work on our website, or follow us on Instagram. Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure talking to you.